deep dive. This time we're tackling the Internet of Things, or IoT as the cool kids call it.
Definitely a hot topic.
It's everywhere you look these days and it's only growing. You're curious about where this is all heading, and luckily we've got some insightful research from Maxime Durian to help us out.
Oh yeah, Darian doesn't mess around. He goes way beyond just the tech stuff. He's thinking about the big picture. How the IoT is actually changing society itself.
Right. We're looking at pieces from two of his books, both on the IoT. So he really digs into the nitty-gritty tech side in Écosystème numérique connectant objets et individus.
A mouthful, right?
It is. Then he kind of switches gears and explores the almost philosophical side in Les prothèses cognitives du corps humain.
He even compares what's coming with the IoT to those major historical shifts in society. It really makes you think.
It does. This idea of Hive Societies that he talks about is a pretty wild image, right? But to get where he's coming from, he starts off with a fun fact. Did you know that the very first Internet of Things gadget was actually a connected toaster back in 1989?
Seriously? It's crazy how far things have come since then. Delian points out how much computing itself has changed. I mean, we've gone from those massive mainframes, that took up entire rooms, and only a handful of people could even use neutral or personal computers. And now with the IoT, it's like everyone has multiple computers just for themselves.
It really makes you realize how much our relationship with tech has changed. It used to be like, you'd go to the computer lab and share one computer with tons of other people. Now we're carrying around phones, laptops, even smartwatches. We have more computing power in our pockets than entire generations before us had access to.
Totally. It's a total paradigm shift. And like Darian points out, all these connected gadgets, we're creating this insane amount of data. Everything from fitness trackers to our fridges are collecting information about us, our habits, what we like, even our movements.
Which kind of brings up a big question. What happens to all that data? And that's where Darian gets super interesting. He talks about this new law in Europe, the Data Act, that's trying to give people more control over the data their devices collect.
Yeah, the Data Act could be a game changer. It basically says that people should have a say in how your data gets used, even if it's just from something as simple as a smart toaster. You know what I mean?
It's like saying, hey, that data came from my Y toaster. It's mine, not some corporations to use however they want.
Exactly. And Durian makes this really interesting point about the Data Act. It specifically mentions how important industrial data is for developing AI.
You mean like my toaster data could be used to train some AI algorithm? That's both cool and kind of creepy.
Right. Who knew our breakfast choices could be shaping the future?
So we've talked about the data, but let's get into it. What exactly are these Hive Societies Durian keeps mentioning?
It's a way to describe a potential future, right? Where we're all so interconnected by technology, it creates a whole new kind of social structure. Almost like, how bees or ants operate.
You mean instead of everyone doing their own thing, it's more about the collective good?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Durian suggests that in a hive society, our decisions, even our thoughts, might be influenced by this central hive mind. Basically a network of algorithms and systems that is kind of guiding our behavior.
Okay, so paint me a picture here. You mentioned smart cities earlier. Imagine a city where AI is directing traffic, managing energy use, even personalizing your commute with data from a million different sensors and devices. That sounds crazy efficient, but also kind of creepy, right? Like, who's actually in control?
It's a question Durian really digs into. He even talks about this concept of smart dust. These microscopic sensors everywhere, in buildings, maybe even our bodies, just collecting data on everything.
Wow. That's getting really Big Brother-ish, isn't it?
It's definitely pushing the limits. It could mean incredibly efficient systems. But, there's that trade-off. Constant surveillance. Potential for misuse of that data. It's a lot to consider.
And that's where the whole hive analogy gets really real, right? If we're all being monitored and influenced by this hive mind, it's like trading our individual freedom for the safety and efficiency of the hive.
Exactly. And that's a key point Durian wants us to think about. Hive societies could mean improvements, like better resource management, maybe even safety. But he really questions what happens to individual liberty and free will in a system like that.
It's not just about if we can build these systems, but if we should, right? And what the trade-offs are.
Totally. Darian doesn't give us easy answers. He's pushing us to grapple with these big questions. Look at how big tech companies operate today. There's a really centralized structure, kind of like, a queen bee running the hive. They've got access to tons of data, and they're using it to manage their employees.
You mean all those algorithms that like schedule meetings, assign tasks, even track employee productivity? That's a glimpse into how a hive society might work on a larger scale.
Maybe. That's what Durians ask us to think about. These companies are already kind of functioning like mini hives. So what happens as those systems get bigger and more complex?
And it's not just corporations, is it? Darian also talks about how AI, things like ChatGPT, could be a huge part of this.
Definitely. He sees AI as potentially the queen bee of these hive societies. I mean, imagine algorithms controlling entire systems, transportation, communication, resource allocation, just making everything as efficient as possible.
It's kind of mind blowing. Super efficient systems that could make life easier, but also, what if you disagree with the AI? Do you even have a choice anymore?
That's a question we need to be asking right now. And Durian's not afraid to bring up those tough questions.
This is a lot to unpack, and we're not done yet. Durian actually gets into some real world examples of hive societies emerging already. It's pretty thought provoking stuff. Okay, so we're back, and I think it's time we dig into some real world examples of these hive societies. It's one thing to talk about them in theory, but is Durian saying they're already happening?
He is. And he actually points to the rise of smart cities as a perfect example. I mean, think about it. You've got tech managing everything from the traffic lights to how the city uses energy. Even public safety is getting in on the action.
So places like, is it Songdo in South Korea? I remember reading about that.
Exactly. Songdo is like the poster child for a totally interconnected city. Sensors everywhere, tracking everything from traffic patterns to, get this, waste management. And they've got AI systems tweaking things in real time to make it all run smoothly.
I bet it's super efficient, but part of me is also thinking, is this what I signed up for?
It's definitely a trade-off. I mean, shorter commutes, cleaner streets, that all sounds great. But, what happens if the AI controlling everything makes a mistake? Or, even worse, someone hacks into the system. It makes you think twice.
And what about the people who actually live in these cities? Do they have any say in how this tech gets used? Or are they just along for the ride?
That's exactly what Durian wants us to ask. We have to be careful about just handing over control to technology, even if it's promising us a better life. Because in a hive society, what's good for the individual might not always line up with what the hive mind decides.
It's like that old saying, right? The needs of the many
Outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Yeah, I get it. There are definitely some upsides. But it does make you wonder about things like individual freedom and autonomy in a world like that. Are those even on the table anymore?
Exactly. It's a question that goes way beyond just technology. It's about what kind of world we actually want to live in.
So as we're wrapping things up here, any final thoughts from Darian? Something for our listeners to chew on as they're, waiting for their smart toasters to pop in the morning.
I think Darian's biggest takeaway is that the future isn't set in stone. We get to decide what it looks like. Will we embrace the hive and put all our eggs in the collective basket? Or can we find a way to balance all this amazing technology with the things that make us individuals? That's the challenge, the opportunity right here, right now.
It's something to think about. So there you have it, a deep dive into the Internet of Things, hive societies, and the big questions they raise about the future.